Hey everyone, happy Friday. Hope you're all enjoying your Thanksgiving holiday weekend. This is our latest Trade of Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, as we continue to cover, obviously, the cannabis space, but also the psychedelic space. We've mentioned a few times in our podcast for the last couple of weeks the amount of attention and support this industry has been receiving from RFK. So, what will this mean going into 2025 once he actually enters into office and becomes leader of the HHS? And who's really going to be named leader of the DEA? And will they be working alongside, obviously, with RFK and working for one common goal to provide more options for people that are battling with mental health? So with that, let's welcome in actually our first guest here today. She's the CEO of Psychedelic Medicine Coalition, Melissa Lavasani. I think it's been probably a year and a half since you've been on, but good to see you again.
Yeah,
and lots to talk about and get caught up on. But how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Really good. Enjoying the Thanksgiving weekend?
Yes, it's been wonderful.
Good stuff. Let's also welcome in former Top Gun fighter pilot and the founder of No Fallen Heroes, Whiz Buckley, back to the show. Good to see you. How are things?
What's up, my brother? Last time I saw you three, I think, was at Psychedelic Science.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Where did time go? That's been a year and a half ago. You know, last June when they said they weren't having it, but they're going to have it obviously this year, June 2025. You're thinking, man, that's 2 years. That's a long ways down the road.
Yeah.
But at this point in your life,
Don't
it's
blink.
amazing how fast a year just seems that much quicker, does it not?
Amen.
Yeah. It's wild. A lot's happened since then too.
Hasn't it? Yeah. Well, look, Melissa, I'll start with you. You're based in Washington, so you're probably labeled as like, the group that you work with, and you're the CEO as like the lead psychedelic lobbyist in Washington. We got some interesting news regarding RFK in the last couple of weeks about his support for psychedelic research once he steps into office, the Trump administration. That grabbed a lot of people's attention, and a lot of people, I think, that follow the space. I think if there's one word that can come to mind, it would probably say, finally, we're getting a little bit of attention in the right way. But based on who you're speaking with and the conversations that you're having, what'd you make of this? And is there more to read into this from what he had outlined?
I mean, no doubt this is a super exciting moment for the psychedelic ecosystem. I don't think we've ever had a political appointee speak so positively about psychedelics before in a public forum. In fact, the current director of HHS was very careful in talking about psychedelics. It was highly political for them. Not that there isn't support. There is absolutely support and a lot of work that has gone into psychedelics very much in the background within HHS. And I think that's a great opportunity for RFK to come in and build on what has already been built within the administration. Because a lot of what has happened at the career staff level. So people that stay in their positions despite whatever president comes in and out, despite whatever's going on with Congress. So there are some
keep their jobs, right?
Yeah, and they're passionate about this, and they want the right thing to happen. And those kinds of people will work with anyone that has the right mindset about these types of issues. And I think that we should all be very cautiously optimistic about what can happen with psychedelics in the next administration. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. I think there's been a lot of talk about dismantling systems and blowing up the corrupt healthcare system we have. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is incremental changes that will impact healthcare over time. Obviously with psychedelics, this year, the big story was MDMA did not get its approval. I don't think that is an indication of FDA's lack of support for psychedelics. I think there were some major issues that were going on with the clinical trials with Lykos and MDMA that weren't addressed properly. And I think it was the right decision for the FDA. I know that on the government side, it was, when that decision was made, it was a little bit of relief, not for anything of, so we're glad psychedelics is not happening now. It was more like, well, we aren't ready yet. And we would like to do some things before these medicines come online. So I think a Secretary of Health position for RFK and psychedelics is very big.
Yeah. We talked about incremental steps, is what Melissa just outlined, Wiz. You speak to a lot of veterans, and veterans need access. And I think if there's anything that you're going to approach, especially with changing things and providing more opportunities, that community is the first people you speak to and refer to. What do you think are incremental steps that you would like to see happen once? Because look, big pharma, when you've factor, I think it's like $750 to $800 billion. Big pharma is producing revenue wise on an annual basis. I hate to say it, That's not going anywhere. That is the
Mhm.
reality, right?
Yeah.
But what can we do to actually be included in some of these conversations to give people ultimately what they need?
Well, RFK is just a breath of fresh air. The day or the night before Veterans Day, a couple weeks ago, Joe Rogan posted a clip just going on a rant about how bullish and pro psychedelics, RFK is, and RFK retweeted that clip. So my phone
Great.
blew up. Secretary of Defense nominee Pete Hegseth, love him or hate him, he was on the Sean Ryan podcast recently, and Sean Ryan was talking about how ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT saved and changed his life. So, to Melissa's point, the fact that we have two potential heavies in a new administration out of the closet, completely out of the closet, being pro psychedelics, especially a potential SecDef nominee. Now, the Secretary of Defense is worried about what? War fighting and killing and all sorts of present stuff. But the fact that he's looking at potential veteran issues is awesome because, as you both know, you've probably heard me say before, the military does an incredible job of training us to do some pretty awful things to another human. But when they're done with us, they do a pretty crappy job of transitioning us back to being a human. So what I'm hearing from the veteran community, man, they could not be more bullish and hopeful. But to Melissa's point about DC and incremental change, it can't come fast enough. I mean,
Yes.
Mel had me up in DC walking around with Rick, and Tim Ferriss was at virtually at the event. But I'll never forget sitting in Kay Granger's chief of staff office, and I gave my ibogaine brief about how it saved and changed my life, and Rick gave his MDMA brief, and I remember the chief of staff looking at us and going, "Why didn't you lead with that stuff, with what Whiz just talked about?" And I was like, I'm a new guy to this fight, so I kind of kept quiet. But Rick did the whole, well, you guys kind of clipped this one. This is the most recent one that you guys clipped, so we blew the dust off of it. So maybe we can kind of get back to some of this stuff that has no party stigma or anything like that. But 22 to veteran, 44 veterans are still checking out every day, man. So incremental to a guy like me looking at grant recipients applying today. Every grant recipient app that I read brings tears to my eyes. So incremental ain't a word that lays good with us. As you guys know, I'm very passionate about this because I see the healing power. So incremental, yay. Let's push it up a little bit if we can.
Yeah, I hear you. Melissa, as you know, like we cover both the cannabis and psychedelic space. And one of the things that we've heard from various lobbyists regarding cannabis is that with this new administration in play, the messaging needs to be about economic opportunities, creating more tax revenue, and most importantly, bringing in constituents to basically put pressure on some of these lawmakers as to what's currently going on. When I think of the psychedelic space, what's the number one thing comes to mind? It's our armed forces, our military veterans. What Wiz just said, 22 to up to 44 people committing suicide every single day, which is staggering. So based off of that, what is the message, or what's the approach and game plan that once this new administration steps into play that you plan to speak to and your approach towards it all?
I think the one thing that's not going to be incremental with the next administration is veterans healthcare and psychedelics. So a lot, and I know that will satisfy you, Wiz. I think that's been something you've been screaming from the rooftops since I've known you, and you're a great champion for that. And I think the last few years of really heavy advocacy from multiple veteran spaces it will finally pay off in this next administration. And Congress, both houses in Congress being Republican, should mean a much smoother road for what's about to happen. So it seems highly, highly likely that Congress in the next Congress that starts in January will make a move on psychedelics for the VA. So there's been a lot of build up to that, and there was a lot of questions on where to start. And my work with the caucus and various officials within Health and Human Services has been a huge indication to me that the time is right now. All the work that we've been doing with the advocacy that we've been doing, with other groups have been doing, is finally going to come to fruition in the next Congress. And I think we should all expect something out of Congress that directs VA towards this, that we got to treat veterans within the VA system. That's been a very big issue. I know that the VA was a little relieved that MDMA didn't happen because they didn't have things in place. The VA moves notoriously slow. They don't really take initiative on big ideas like this. They wait for Congress to direct them. So I think Congress was getting up to speed on this issue the last 4 years. And obviously,
How much so? Do you think? How much so in the last 4 years? Has it been enough, or do you think is there room for improvement?
There's always room for improvement, but I think it's been enough where that, we can create something within the VA system that can treat veterans with psychedelics, that can, also at the same time collect the data through rigorous research. There's all kinds of pockets all over the country with the VA is doing this research already. It's just been not coordinated and organized the way it should be within the VA. And I think what's going to happen next within Congress is going to create organization and coordination of that research within the VA system. It's the largest healthcare system that exists in our country. It's a way to kind of test out what works, what doesn't work in a healthcare system like that before these medicines really scale up into a much bigger market.
Yeah.
Hey, Shad, real quick, to Mel's point with MDMA, I'm going to steal something from NASA and Apollo 13. I think that was a successful failure. I'm actually glad that failed. We actually got some lessons learned, and we can reattack and make things better. So just like a fighter pilot, when we debrief after a bad mission, it wasn't a bad mission because in the debrief, we figured out what went wrong and how we're not going to do that again. So that was a successful failure. But back to your question about some money, and Mel probably knows who and first of all, Mel is doing yeoman's work. Her and her organization are burning literally the midnight oil. So Mel, thank you for everything you're doing to help heal our heroes. But during one of my
Thanksgiving weekends, you're thankful for that. So
gratitude for Mel and all she does. But one of the Mel knows probably who I'm talking about. We met with an appropriator. And behind closed doors, man, I was laying on full whiz about how many lives we're losing and everything like that. And this guy really wasn't budging too much. But, Juliana Mercer, great Marine Corps veteran, she rolled in with numbers. She started, and I should know this stuff, and I don't because I cared about the lives, I thought. But she started hitting with X amount of billion the VA spends on PTS therapy and X amount on this. And that guy sat forward in his chair and said, all right, well, now you're talking. So I'm like, you son of a bitch. You care more about the money than you do the lives. And then this was disgusting. And Mel, you got to head this off before it happens. This guy got to the point where he's like, so if we heal all these veterans suffering from PTS, we could save X amount on their disability. I'm like, whoa. Wow. Could you imagine healing a guy or a gal that's had PTS for years and then saying, well, now that you're healed, we're taking your $3,000 a month that you live on because we healed you. So let's stop at a certain point with healing our heroes. And
there's a great example right there, though, Whiz, because you talk about Lycos failing, but actually a good fail because we learned what we've learned. By going to Washington in that particular case, you understand how these guys are thinking now, right?
That was awful. Yeah.
It's sometimes it's brutal to obviously see the truth. I've been to Washington a few times, and everything that everybody's told me about, it's that and that much and even more. And that's the part where it kind of leaves you unsettled leaving there because they call it a swamp for a reason. But at the same time, you actually have a blueprint now on what to push back on. And at the same time, too, I think the number one thing that sells, and of course it is, that sells this industry is the data that's being performed, right?
Amen. So Mel, let's not forget about that. Let's sneak something in legislation that says veterans should continue to get their disability payments even if they're healed,
Yeah. So, and that might require more reform. That has nothing to do with psychedelics. Maybe disability reform at the VA is an issue that needs to be tackled. Like, just because you're healed doesn't mean that your life is turned around, right? Like, we all know this. Wiz, you and I have gone through this situation before. It takes time to get back on your feet again. And, there's no point in creating all these wonderful healing mechanisms and healing programs within the VA if we're just going to throw them out in the world with no resources. So, and it is unfortunate that politicians have to think that way. And I'm probably playing devil's advocate a little bit, but this is the perspective that people who create the laws in our country have to take into consideration. They almost have to dehumanize issues like this a little bit, because they get pushback and questions from their constituents. They're like, why did you approve this amount of budget for this? We need X, Y, and Z. Everybody has needs. There's limited amount of resources. Does the government spend the money the best way possible? No, we know our defense budget is super inflated. We know how much money goes into healthcare and how poor our healthcare is in this country. Like, it's pretty pitiful. But, I think that at that moment that you were experiencing Whiz, it was, he had lost his filter a little bit, and he forgot he was in a room full of advocates, and he was sharing his inner monologue, unfortunately. But like,
gets somebody to change though is when they're personally affected. And
exactly.
That's stick around long enough, and eventually it will happen for anybody.
I think everybody listening to this, Shad, should watch the 3-ish minute clip of RFK Jr. when he's asked about psychedelics. I forget the guy what the interview is, and he said, "I'm a recovering alcoholic. It sounded like replacing one drug with another, and then my beautiful bride took her life, 2012, and my son was done." And then he goes into talking about how his son ayahuasca, and he came home, and I got my son back. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to listen to RFK tell that story.
Is he he's a recovered alcoholic?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He had some bad times in his life. So he's the perfect guy, because he's like, I had these biases. I'm like, psychedelics, drugs. What are you people nuts? And then it saved my son's life. You gotta watch that clip. I think one guy that we neglected to mention so far is Elon. The dude's like the stepson of Donald Trump right now. The guy is very pro psychedelics as well. He could not be. He's a ketamine guy, and he said, it's helped save my life. So I think Elon, having whatever role he's going to have, which is kind of chief disruptor, I think is going to help the psychedelic movement as well.
Well, what's great is that you got some smart minds. Whether you like them or don't like them, you can't dispute the fact that they're very intelligent people. And how are people intelligent? Well, you look at Elon. He's wealthiest man in the world, and is landed a 20-story spaceship, in one spot. I'd say he's pretty intelligent, to say the least. But then RFK, you think about the family history and the people that he's been involved and the experiences he's had in life. Like that's
trauma
in a world. Yeah, it's incredible, right? You want to see and be inspired by people like that. So whether they've made mistakes or learned things along the way, those are the types of leaders that you want, not only for your country, but obviously for a business that's run
Chad,
too.
You could put this sentence on my tombstone. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. So that's when I look at anybody,
that's amazing.
It's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that defines me. Trust me.
Look, we cover things from a business finance angle, and like Whiz, since this announcement has been made about research with RFK towards psychedelics, we've seen big pharma stocks actually come down a little bit. They've actually been hit pretty hard. I don't want to say hard, but yes, they have been affected by that announcement. Saying that, I said earlier that these companies are producing anywhere from $750 to $800 billion on an annual basis. Do you think within their portfolio this becomes more and more of an important conversation, or are we getting ahead of ourselves thinking that, yes, do I think big pharma is going to get involved? Yes. But how much do you think of a priority it is based on some of the recent events that have taken place?
Chad, it was a great pairs trade. Shameless plug for Top Gun Options. We right as soon as, hey, Donald Trump's the 47th president, long psychedelic stocks, short the pharma stocks. That was a great pairs trade, and we printed money. Whether it's Cybin recently coming out with some great phase 2 and phase 3. I mean, just about every publicly traded psychedelic company has come out recently with something good. And to Mel's point earlier, I remember when they came out with MindMed came out with whatever it was, MM120.
Back in March.
When the CEO kind of talked about how great it was not so subtle poke at Lykos, because he's like, and by the way, all of this greatness happened without having to lie on a couch. I'm clearly paraphrasing, but they were taking veiled pot shots and letting the FDA know, like, this ain't any couch stuff. This is true medicine. But when it comes to big pharma, Shad, if I was the CEO of Pfizer on the top story in my office with my cigar in the Wall Street Journal, there ain't no way on God's green earth I'm going to let a little publicly traded psychedelic company come out with something that's going to treat 40 million Americans for generalized anxiety disorder. I'm going to, on line one, get me the CFO, get your size 12 checkbook, and swoop in and take it. And unfortunately, whether you're Christian Angermeyer or any of these psychedelic CEOs, they have a fiduciary duty to who? Not the healing people in the psychedelic space. They have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders.
Yeah, good
So if
point.
somebody comes in, if Pfizer comes a knocking, and even though it makes your skin crawl, they write a big check.
It's
These
happening.
companies, yeah, exactly. So
You think that happens in 2025? It
dude,
happens that soon?
I'm well.
I think they
in the
need to
next
come online first.
Okay.
exactly, they're going to
Yeah.
Similar
let
to what
these
Bravado and Johnson, because look at those numbers. Yes,
exactly.
it's small in comparison to some of the other drugs the big pharma companies are doing, but it's telling to see that over $1 billion in sales and revenue this year, which
Chad,
is
it's the big pharma companies are prize fighters. With the little publicly traded psychedelic companies, they're going to get winded. They're going to running out of cash. They'll get their phase 3. Everything looks good. Then you swoop in and buy them. They're going to let them burn out all their cash and everything like that, and then swoop in and buy them. There's no point in doing it now. To Melissa's point, wait until you get the good news, scoop them up. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
couldn't
traditional
agree more.
pharma, traditional pharma doesn't want to do the messy work that you have to do right now
Of course,
with the
they
psychedelic
wouldn't.
space.
Exactly.
And we know
They're
that.
going to let us do that and let these companies become profitable and then kind of swoop in. And it's kind of on the psychedelic ecosystem to ensure that it isn't this, big sweeping thing that takes over and changes how psychedelic medicines are going to play a role in the mental health space.
Agreed.
We want to keep to the integrity of what all these companies are trying to do. If we can do that, it's pretty hard to do that in a for-profit system.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a little while, and it's lovely that we have a Secretary of Health that is a true believer in this, but ultimately the DEA is not under his jurisdiction as Secretary of Health. It's going to have to be a coordinated effort. There are administrative processes to all these changes that we are hoping to see, and it's going to take some time for the administration itself to kind of get in place, get acclimated, get the people in the right place so that moves can happen. Our government is very big and it's very bureaucratic, and I'm 100% sure we could work more efficiently, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just blow everything up and have to start all over again. There are good things about our system.
I don't think that's going to happen either, but
Yeah.
what I do think is that, and which is great, is there's not a huge uplift that has to be involved in this space. You just want some of this to be like a conversation that needs to be
For
taking
sure.
place.
And
awareness, man. It is
an awareness.
When regular mom and pop walking down the street hears this type of conversation, or Marcus Luttrell, Navy SEAL, or these veterans, this psychedelic I love my hippies and my folks who wear the drug rugs and the mala beads, but putting it in the water probably wasn't the tactic to go with back in the day, right? It really freaked everybody out, and the government capitalized on that. This time around, whether it's veterans, first responders, or family members, or moms like Mel, regular other people can go, wow, these people, they ain't crazy hippies or anything like that. Maybe we can listen to them. I said this, you guys have heard me say this. This is a we the people moment. This ain't coming from Washington down. This is coming from us up, and I love seeing the Morgan Luttrells or the Crenshaws, who I love seeing blood red Republicans, veterans saying we need this stuff to heal our heroes. So as we've said before, I read a headline a year and a half ago or whatever, AOC and Dan Crenshaw, and I didn't want to read the rest of it. What, killed each other? Agree on psychedelic assisted therapy on veterans. And if we can get those two people agreeing on something, maybe it's a good thing to do. To Mel's point, blowing things up usually doesn't work well unless you're in war. Why don't we take some disinfectant and keep the house, but it needs a spring cleaning, and I think good things will happen.
A little renovation.
Yeah,
exactly.
So look, let's just call it. I think that's amazing. Some people may say, well, that could be wishful thinking. Mel, when you look at this, you talked about incremental steps to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first things that you need to do, or you'd like to see this administration get done once it steps into play to advance the narrative forward for this space?
Well, just within HHS alone. So what has happened in the last few years is there's been genuine interest in the psychedelic ecosystem within the career staff at HHS. There's been a lot of work that has been happening very quietly in the background. It's very, they were trying to keep it under wraps, but it's very public now that there was a potential RFP that could have gotten put out to put together a task force, a public-private partnership within that HHS hosts. It includes members of Congress, various other government officials, stakeholders from within the ecosystem. That RFP has been sitting on somebody's desk for probably a year now. And
Wow.
the only reason the current administration didn't go through with putting this RFP out is because they were worried about political fallout. They knew that once they realized the Biden reelection was at risk,
Yes.
it kind of put the brakes on all of that work that is happening. So I think that the
It
first
put the
change that
company, I should say, it put the country on pause is what it did,
it
right?
kind of did. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I certainly felt it in DC. There was things that Congress wanted to do that they weren't really quite ready to do, that kind of went on pause, and everything, came to a screeching halt to a certain extent this year, especially. But I think that one of the things that's going to happen quickly is I'm really, really hoping this HHS RFP will finally get put out into the public, so people can start applying for it, and that we can start moving with that. There's a lot of interest within the administration to kind of get this right, because they feel like they really fumbled on cannabis. And while that is a more economic argument, not as much a healthcare argument, they're acknowledging that it wasn't done right. So they're now at a point with psychedelics where they're engaged much earlier on in the process. We're not decades down the road with psychedelic advocacy, but we're still in the beginning phases of it. I think that
So
people should also expect.
how soon do you think realistically this RFP could be presented? Like, is this something we always talk about the new administration coming in? They have bigger priorities to focus on within the first 100 days. With
Mhm.
the HHS, that doesn't fall into the same kind of realm. But what would you like to see? Not like to see, but what do you think is a realistic timeline to have something like this reviewed, knowing it's been sitting around for the past year or so and no movement in play?
Well, with RFK as Secretary of Health, I think it's be reasonable for 6 to 8 months that, if he's coming out and saying, I want the issue of psychedelics to move within the federal government,
Yeah.
I know the exact people who are going to be approaching him with like, hey, if you want it to move, like this is a great first step. The same thing with Congress as well. Like there's been a lot of conversation on treating veterans with psychedelics, doing it within the VA system, kind of organizing the research that's happening there. The VA has already been outspoken on, doing the studies that the FDA wanted to see with the Lycos trial, but didn't get. So I think that everything's kind of been building up to this moment, and we're fortunate that we have an administration coming in that is really wants to foster the growth of this. So I think the first 6 to 8 months of the administration, it's going to take some time to get people in place. Like the inauguration is January 20th. We will see what the committees shake out to be in Congress. So we need time, and there needs to be time to get the appointeds in and like settled and ready to go. So I don't think real work will start until the end of February or March. So give them a half of the year to get this done. Even if it takes the end of 2025, I think that is still moving extremely quickly. But I know there's a lot of interest in the Trump admin to just move quickly on some of these things. And I hope that he's hiring the kind of people who know how to make things happen within government. I think that's really important. We saw that with his first administration.
That's the most encouraging thing right now, is you feel like he learned a lot from 2016. Let's face it, that's 8 years ago. And I think he leaned on a lot of people, especially in government. That's brand new, because when you saw some of the interviews that he had with Joe Rogan to say, look, you're now president, you got to learn as you go. And by the way, you're the most important person in the world, running the largest and most powerful country in the world, and you've never been a politician before. But fast forward 8 years later, you can understand what he's learned in Washington, what he wants, a lot of stuff he doesn't want. And with that, I think he's bringing on like-minded people that are seeing things from a business aspect at first. But I do think that there's a lot of lingo that he says that's for television, because I think when you actually speak to him one-on-one and amongst the other people that are involved, that's the encouraging thing that I think a lot of people are wanting to see what happens next. Whether it happens or not, still a question, right?
Yeah. I mean, and we've seen Trump be really progressive on certain things. Like he was super progressive on some criminal justice reforms that happened in his first admin. I think that was an absolute win for him, a win for everybody. I think the difference the unfortunate thing that happened with his first admin is there's a bit of brain drain, I call it, of government, of people within government that have been there for many, many years that know how to make things happen. They know how to grease the wheels to make things happen.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that, he cycled through a lot of those people. I think a lot of those people were like very institutional DC people. I'm hoping with this round, he's bringing in those creative thinkers, but also has some people that still know how to make things move, because there are going to be roadblocks along the way, and how we're going to overcome that is yet to be determined. But
I think the greatest thing, I think the greatest thing, Whiz, in some of this stuff is I feel like the people haven't been heard in a long, long time. And I think that's all we want, is just to be heard. And I think some of the people that are in play right now are actually listening. And I've seen that even Vivek Ramaswamy, when he's talking about the transgender, there were some angry people towards him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually at an event in Wisconsin one time. I thought the way he handled himself was great. He's just like, let me hear what you have to say and what your concerns were. And at the end of the day, they both had a conversation where they mutually agreed, like they met in the middle. Like one person wasn't right or wrong. And that's
right.
Correct.
I mean, everything is highly politicized. It's campaign season. The sensational things
Agreed.
that a candidate says are those sound bites. The more sound bites he gets in the media, the better off he's doing. So but I do think that when you isolate people and you take away the microphone and you make it a real conversation, we have more in common than you would initially assume. So
that's what podcasts are for, right?
That's what podcasts are for. Exactly.
One last thing I'll leave with both of you is we looked at Lycos and some of the results that came out and the way the trial was being conducted. I think there was a little bit of a dark cloud over the industry for a couple of months there. But when we look at this new administration, some of the stuff that's come out lately, and then as well the data that's come out with Cybin, among a few other things recently, have we moved on from that? Would you say that sort of hangover from Lycos and the news that came out is now past us and it's onwards, Whiz?
Absolutely. Like we talked about earlier, it was a successful failure. Most people, when things go wrong in life, they go, "Oh, that sucked," and they move on to the next thing. The fact that at least some of the people I know stopped, debriefed, figured out how to change the messaging. You learn more from your losses than your successes. So that is absolutely behind us.
That's a very good point.
One of the biggest things, one of the biggest gifts the medicine gave me is the ability to be present. August, I don't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, let alone what happened in August. So those failures are behind us, and we're using them. We're using those lessons learned to power forward. I think it was also a successful failure. This isn't my soundbite, but it at least appears to a lot of the vets in my trenches were like, well, FDA is in bed with big pharma. I think they kind of took a little bit of that on the chin too. Like, well, isn't that great? We're losing 24 to 44 veterans a day. They're in bed with big pharma. So the next time somebody approaches them with something, they're probably going to be, first of all, it's going to be a little tighter and better and a nice, better box and testing and everything like that. But the FDA in the back of their mind is going to have people like me going, you're in bed with big pharma. Well, let's prove them wrong and do it. So successful failures in a lot of areas. And I couldn't be more bullish on the psychedelic sector, but I couldn't be more bullish on healing people. Because you guys know me very well by now. If they start dropping the ball, I will be the loudest advocate. I will have my pitchfork and torches, and I will be in D.C. tearing apart the Republicans if they fail to deliver. I'm an equal opportunity torture, man. This is a non-partisan issue. Healing our heroes healing and everybody in this country is nonpartisan. Obviously, you both know there ain't no money in healing, but we got to put that type of mentality behind us, because the world would be a much better place if we were healed.
Successful failure. I like that. Sounds like you should have been in Colorado's locker room last week when Dion was speaking. I know your son goes to school there, but that was a tough loss for them. You guys got so caught up with everybody was saying about you, and you don't know what success
is. He was right, wasn't he? Like you believed your own press. Never believe your own press, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you both checking in here. Happy Thanksgiving weekend. If I could leave one last thing, and I'll ask both of you. Melissa, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for my family and the opportunity that, their support for me in working in this space Whiz knows this is a very tough movement at times to be in. We're in our infancy. It's like cannabis if in the 90s, where like everyone's trying to figure out their place. The money is scarce. But I'm just so grateful that I'm able to, have this job that I don't even really see as a job. It's just, it's something I'm really passionate about, getting the word out about psychedelics, trying to change laws, trying to influence our government to do the right thing. That's what, being an American is about, that, I can be the daughter of immigrants and, kind of have built this life for myself in Washington, D.C. and, fall on my face, and then pick myself back up again and become a psychedelic advocate and try to make things better for Americans in the future. I think that that's just exactly what I'm grateful for.
Well, I'll leave this with you. It always makes people happy. It's progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And anytime you make progress in life, you don't compare yourself to anybody and you're just moving ahead. There's going to be bumps along the way, but if you're making progress, that's what keeps you going. Whiz, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for both of you, man. Mel, thanks for putting in the work. Thankful to be on the Tango Delta Romeo podcast. I woke up this morning in a house.
I love that.
Running water, my bride, my kids. I am absolutely thankful for just life. I'm hopeful we might start seeing a little peace on earth, man. Killing another human being, turning somebody else into hair, teeth, and eyeballs is not the way that God, whatever word you choose to use, put us here for. So I'm grateful for the potential that there might be peace on earth, because this is just this ain't the way. Killing each other is not the way. And again, 5 years ago, Wiz, if I heard me talking like this on a podcast, I would have kicked my own ass. But that's also, as you both know, one of the reasons these medicines still remain federally illegal is because they can turn warriors into peacemakers. But a little more peacemakers in the world, I think we'll be in a better place.
Well, I think it's the right strategy. You got people at least that are now listening to you or will want to listen to those conversations. But I think the big takeaway here is just like you start with the military, the constituents, and you have basically stories off of that. And then really in a lot of ways, if Republicans, that's unfortunately going to look at things from an economic standpoint, we can start talking about the less pressure it'll have on the healthcare system, which is obviously huge. And I think that's the right approach that needs to be taken in this space. But the great thing is that you're going to have the right people that are open to those conversations. So on that note, best of luck moving forward. Let's keep in touch and onwards as we head into 2025 with this new administration. Melissa, Whiz, enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend.
Thanks, Chad.
Happy Thanksgiving.
See you, Mel.
Thank you. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. What'd you all think? Is there any information that we're missing? Is there anything you want us to cover? As these industries heat up, we're getting access to more and more big hosts. So let us know the questions that you want us to ask for you. As usual, smash that like button. We want this to go viral. Click on that bell for all notifications for the latest interviews that we're doing. And as usual, let's build this community. Subscribe to our channel because we appreciate it, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.